I had never been the kind of man who questioned his wife's loyalty. Laura and I had been married for 8 years, and I had always believed that trust was the foundation of our relationship. We had our routines, our habits, our inside jokes, things that made our marriage feel solid, unshakable. That's why I didn't think twice about coming home early. I was supposed to have a late meeting with a client, something that would keep me at the office until at least 9. At the last minute, the client cancelled, and I found myself with an unexpected free evening. I saw it as an opportunity. Things between Laura and me had felt routine lately, comfortable but predictable. Maybe a surprise dinner together would be a good way to shake things up. I didn't text her to let her know I was on my way. I wanted to see the look on her face when I walked through the door. I even considered picking up dinner from her favorite place but decided I'd ask her first. The drive home was quiet, uneventful. The streets were mostly empty, the sun starting to set, casting long shadows across the road. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked normal. Laura's car was parked in its usual spot. The house was lit the way it always was in the evenings. Nothing seemed out of place. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt different. The air was still. The house was silent. Laura usually had the TV on when she was home alone, or music playing in the background while she worked on something. The silence unsettled me, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was reading, or maybe she had stepped out for a moment. I set my keys down on the table and took a few steps toward the living room. That's when I heard it. A sound from upstairs. It was faint, but distinct. A low, rhythmic creaking. I stopped moving. For a few seconds, I just listened. The sound continued, steady, unbroken. Then, beneath it, I heard something else. A voice. A man's voice. My pulse slowed. My mind raced to find a reasonable explanation, but I already knew. I took a step forward, then another. My movements were slow, measured, like my body hadn't yet caught up with the reality of the situation. I moved toward the stairs, every muscle in my body tense. As I climbed higher, the noises became clearer. It wasn't just movement. It was conversation. I reached the top of the stairs. My heart was pounding in my ears, but I wasn't breathing heavily. I was too focused, too locked in. The bedroom door was half open. Light spilled out into the hallway. Shadows shifted inside. I stepped closer. Then I pushed the door open. Laura was inside. She wasn't alone. The man was standing near the bed, half-dressed, reaching for his shirt. Laura turned sharply, her face shifting from surprise to something else, shock, guilt, panic. Her hands clenched at the sheets, as if covering herself would somehow undo what I had already seen. She took a step forward, her mouth opening like she wanted to explain something. I didn't react. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I just stared at her, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered. The man looked at me, his expression unreadable. I had never seen him before. He wasn't someone from our social circle, not a friend, not a coworker I had met at one of her office parties. He was just someone else. Someone she had brought into our home. Laura's lips moved, but no words came out. She wanted to say something, to spin a lie, to find a way to explain the unexplainable. I didn't give her the chance. I turned around and walked out. She called my name. I ignored her. I took the stairs quickly, my steps controlled. My mind was strangely clear. I wasn't in shock. I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what had just happened. I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. The air was sharp, the kind of cold that usually cleared my head. But nothing could clear this. I got into my car and started the engine. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, but I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicked. I just drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I drove without a destination, letting the road stretch ahead of me while my mind worked through the last 10 minutes over and over again. Every detail replayed in my head with perfect clarity: the open bedroom door, the way Laura's face shifted from shock to guilt, the stranger's hurried movements as he reached for his clothes. My hands were steady on the wheel, but something inside me was tightening, twisting, making it harder to breathe. Stopping at a red light, I exhaled slowly. There was no denying what I had seen. No way to twist it into something else. I wasn't the type to be paranoid, to imagine things that weren't real. Laura had been with another man. In my house. In my bed. I had walked away without a word, but that didn't mean I was done. I had left because I needed control, because I refused to react on impulse. But now, I needed something more. I needed to know everything. I pulled into an empty parking lot and turned off the engine. Sitting there in the silence, I stared at my phone. I could already imagine the messages waiting for me, Laura trying to explain, to justify. I unlocked my screen and checked. 3 missed calls. 1 text. Please come back. Let me explain. I ignored it. Instead, I went into our shared phone plan account. Laura never thought I had any reason to check, and she was right until now. I pulled up her call history and started scrolling. There were a lot of numbers I didn't recognize. I filtered through the list, looking for patterns. One number stood out immediately, appearing almost every day for the past few months. Late-night calls, short ones during her lunch break, long conversations in the evenings when she was supposedly out running errands. I copied the number and ran a quick search. No name. No public records. A burner phone, or at least a private line. That told me enough. I sat back, thinking. I could call him. Demand answers. But that wouldn't give me what I needed. I didn't want excuses. I didn't want apologies. I wanted facts. I opened my laptop, connected to my mobile hotspot, and pulled up her location history. We had shared our locations for years. It started as something practical, useful for quick check-ins. Now, it was the key to uncovering the truth. I scanned the data. Multiple visits to a hotel in the next town over. A pattern of disappearing for hours on specific days. Times when she had told me she was at work or out with friends. I checked the last time she had been there. 2 days ago. I stared at the screen, my fingers tightening into a fist. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. She had been doing this for months. The realization settled deep in my stomach. I had spent years believing in my marriage, trusting Laura without question. And now, within an hour, I had dismantled everything I thought I knew about her. I needed to see it for myself. I started the car and pulled out of the lot, heading toward the hotel. It was a small place, the kind designed for discretion, far enough from home to avoid recognition but close enough for convenience. I parked across the street and observed the entrance. No valet, no front desk visible from the outside. A place where people came and went without questions. I checked the time. Laura was still at home, or at least, she was supposed to be. I had no idea if she was with him right now, if she had gone back, if she was still trying to figure out how to handle the situation. But I wasn't going to sit and wait for her to tell me. I stepped out of the car and walked inside. The lobby was small, empty except for a receptionist who barely glanced up at me. I walked toward the elevator, pretending I belonged there. No one stopped me. On the second floor, I moved down the hallway, checking the numbers. I knew the room she had been in 2 days ago. I had the data. I stopped in front of the door and stared at it. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I wasn't expecting him to be here. But I had to be sure. I pulled out my phone and opened a notes app. I typed a simple message: I know everything. Then I slid the phone under the door and walked away. Back in my car, I checked Laura's location again. She was still home. I had time. I drove back, my thoughts clear. I wasn't going to let her lie to me. I wasn't going to let her tell me half-truths, to manipulate the situation into something smaller than what it was. She had spent months making me believe in something that didn't exist. Now, it was her turn to face reality. I parked a few houses down and sat there, watching my own home from a distance. The lights were on, casting a warm glow through the curtains, making it look exactly as it always had. A normal house. A safe place. A home. But I knew better now. The warmth was artificial. The safety was a lie. And the person waiting inside wasn't my wife, not in the way I had once believed. She had been waiting for me. She had probably been pacing, checking her phone every few minutes, wondering what I was doing, where I had gone, when I would come back. Maybe she was hoping I wouldn't come back at all, that I would disappear for the night and give her time to think of the perfect excuse, the right words to make this seem smaller than it was. She didn't know I had already seen everything I needed. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house. My movements were calm, measured. I wasn't in a hurry. There was no reason to rush. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, closing it behind me with the same ease I always had. She was in the living room, waiting. Laura had changed out of whatever she had been wearing before. She looked composed now, casual, as if she wanted to make it seem like she had spent the evening doing something ordinary. But she wasn't relaxed. Her posture was stiff, her fingers lightly gripping the edge of the couch. Her eyes locked onto me the second I entered, scanning my face, searching for something, anything, that would tell her what I was thinking. I set my keys down on the table. I didn't speak. She hesitated, then exhaled. "I know what you think you saw," she finally said, her voice quieter than usual. I didn't react. "It wasn't like that," she continued, stepping forward slightly. "I swear." I still said nothing. "It was a mistake," she said, the words rushed, desperate. "A terrible, horrible mistake. I was going to tell you. I pulled out my phone and opened the call log. I turned the screen toward her, letting her see it. The number she had been calling for months, the one she thought I'd never look for, was staring back at her. Her face drained of color. 247 calls, I said, my voice even, controlled. 62 hours of conversations. 14 late-night calls that lasted more than an hour. She swallowed hard, shaking her head. "You weren't going to tell me anything," I said. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. 16 trips to the hotel, I continued, swiping to the next screen. Always on the same days. Always the same amount of time. Never once did you slip up. You knew exactly how to cover your tracks. Her lips trembled. "Until today," I said. She took a shaky breath. "I don't." The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. She flinched. She knew I had her. There was no way out now. No half-truths, no softened version of events. Everything was exposed, and she was standing in the wreckage. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked defeated. "I don't know what you want me to say," she whispered. I placed my phone down on the table and met her eyes. "You don't need to say anything," I said. "You've already said enough." The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I had walked into this house as a husband. Now, I was just a man standing in a place that no longer felt like mine. She shifted her weight, her fingers gripping the couch harder. She was waiting for me to speak, to ask questions, to give her a chance to explain. I wasn't going to. I had already found the truth. I had already seen everything I needed. I watched as she struggled to find something, anything, to say. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Maybe she thought tears would come later, when the full weight of what she had done crashed down on her. Or maybe she was waiting for me to say something cruel, something she could latch onto and twist into a reason to justify what she had done. I wouldn't give her that. She let out a slow breath. "I didn't want to hurt you." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I looked at her, my expression unchanged. "You didn't want to hurt me," I repeated. "And yet, here we are." Her face twisted slightly, like she wanted to argue but knew she couldn't. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I said. "Every single time you drove to meet him. Every single time you came home to me afterward." She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "I don't want to hear excuses," I said. "I don't want to hear that it didn't mean anything, or that you felt neglected, or that you were lonely. I want the truth." She blinked rapidly, as if she hadn't expected that. "The truth? How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "How long, Laura?" I repeated, my voice steady. Her lips parted, but the words didn't come immediately. Then, finally, she spoke. 8 months, she whispered. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not pain. Something colder. Something final. 8 months. More than half a year. I let the weight of that sink in. She shifted again, uncomfortable under my gaze. "I never meant for it to happen." I tilted my head slightly. "You never meant to get caught." Her breath hitched slightly. "That's not what I..." "But that's what you meant," I said. "If I hadn't walked in today, you would have kept going, wouldn't you?" She hesitated. That pause told me everything I needed to know. I nodded slowly, exhaling. "That's what I thought." The silence between us stretched longer this time. For the first time, I let my eyes wander around the room. The pictures on the walls, the furniture we picked out together, the space that was supposed to be ours. It felt smaller now. Colder. Like it didn't belong to me anymore. Finally, I looked back at her. "I'm leaving," I said simply. Her breath caught. "What?" I didn't repeat myself. I turned and walked toward the stairs, heading to our bedroom. No, not ours. Hers now. I grabbed a bag from the closet and started packing. Clothes, essentials. Nothing more. I didn't need anything from this place anymore. Laura appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "You don't have to go," she said quickly. "We can." I zipped the bag closed and walked past her. She followed me down the stairs, her words stumbling now, more desperate. Just wait. Please. Let's talk about this." I reached the front door. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. I looked at her one last time. "No," I said. Then I walked out, closing the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city lights flickering past as my mind replayed every detail of the past few hours. The moment I had walked into that bedroom. The way Laura's face twisted in panic. The silence that followed when she realized there was no way out. The weight of it all should have felt unbearable, but it didn't. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I was clear. Anger wasn't enough. Leaving wasn't enough. She needed to feel what I felt. She had spent 8 months weaving a lie, securing a secret life that existed only because I had trusted her blindly. That trust had been my mistake. Now, I was going to take everything from her the way she had taken everything from me. I pulled into a gas station parking lot, put the car in park, and reached for my phone. The first thing I did was open my notes. I had been gathering information ever since I left the house, piecing everything together while the truth was still fresh. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about making sure she felt the collapse. I scrolled through my list. Step 1: expose her at work. Laura's job was one of the most important things in her life. She had always been ambitious, climbing her way up the corporate ladder with precision and discipline. She had spent years building a reputation as a dedicated professional. The kind of employee who was seen as reliable, trustworthy. She had risked it all for this. I pulled up her company's website, found the contact information for her HR department, and started typing. To whom it may concern. I'm writing to inform you that one of your employees, Laura, last name, has been engaging in an inappropriate workplace affair with a married man. I have undeniable proof, including timestamps of when they left the office together, locations they visited, and messages exchanged. I understand your company has policies regarding professional conduct, and I believe you should be aware of what has been happening behind the scenes. I attached the evidence. Screenshots of her location history. Photos of her car parked at the hotel. Proof that she had used work hours to meet with him. I reread the email once, twice. Then I hit send. Step 2, destroy her social circle. Cheaters don't just lie to their partners. They lie to everyone. Laura had managed to keep her betrayal hidden not just from me, but from her friends, her family, the people who actually believed she was a good person. She had spent 8 months pretending. Now, it was time for them to see the truth. I scrolled through my contacts and selected her closest friends. The ones who always backed her up. The ones who called me the perfect husband whenever we went out together, completely unaware of what she had been doing behind closed doors. I drafted a message. I wanted to reach out because I think you deserve to know the truth about Laura. For the past 8 months, she has been having an affair behind my back. I'm not looking for sympathy, I just want you to know who she really is. If you still consider her a friend after this, that's your choice. But at least now, you know. I attached the screenshots. The hotel visits. The call logs. The proof that there was no misunderstanding. Then I hit send. Step 3, tell her parents. Laura's parents had always liked me. They were the kind of people who prided themselves on family values, who raised their daughter with the expectation that she would be loyal, committed, honest. If they knew what she had done, they wouldn't just be disappointed, they would be ashamed. I found her mother's number and typed out the message. I never thought I'd have to send this, but I believe you deserve the truth. Laura has been having an affair for the past 8 months. I have proof. I don't know what happens next, but I can't allow her to pretend that everything is fine. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Send. Her parents would call her the second they saw that message. She wouldn't be able to avoid it. She wouldn't be able to lie her way out of it. Step 4, burn her affair to the ground. This was the final move. The one that mattered the most. I had found out everything I needed about the man Laura had been sleeping with. Adam Swigert. A married man. A father. A husband who had spent months sneaking around behind his wife's back, just like Laura had done to me. Rachel Swigert had no idea. Until now. I pulled up her number and started typing. Rachel, I don't know how to say this, but you need to know the truth. Your husband, Adam, has been having an affair with my wife, Laura, for the past 8 months. I have proof. Photos, messages, timestamps. If you want to see everything, I will send it to you. You deserve to know exactly who you're married to. I attached the files. The receipts. The undeniable evidence that her life, just like mine, had been a lie. I didn't hesitate. Send. Then I sat back in my seat and stared at my screen. No unread messages. Not yet. But soon. Step 5, watch it all fall apart. It started within minutes. Laura's friends were the first to respond. Some were shocked. Some refused to believe it at first. Then, after I sent the proof, the messages changed. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. How could she do this? She always talked about how much she loved you. What the hell? Then came her parents. Her mother called twice. I didn't answer. Then the text started. Tell me this isn't true. We're calling Laura. She needs to explain. I don't know what to say. We never thought she was capable of this. Her father sent only one message. I'm sorry. You deserved better. Then, finally, Rachel. She didn't call. She didn't hesitate. She responded with a single text. Send me everything. I did. Every detail. Every receipt. Every piece of evidence that had been sitting in my phone for hours, waiting for this moment. Then I turned my phone off and started the car. Laura had spent 8 months lying to me, manipulating me, taking everything we built and tearing it apart for someone who didn't even matter. Now, she was about to experience exactly what that felt like. And I wasn't going to be there to help her pick up the pieces. I didn't go back to the house that night. There was no point. Everything that needed to happen was already in motion. Laura was going to be too busy watching her life collapse to worry about where I was. And even if she did, I wasn't answering her calls. Instead, I checked into a hotel across town. A cheap place, nothing fancy, just a quiet room with a bed and a chair. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll through my phone, waiting for updates. I just sat there in the silence, letting everything sink in. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up to the buzzing of my phone. I checked the screen. 12 missed calls. 22 messages. Laura. Her parents. Some of her friends. A few numbers I didn't recognize, but I could guess who they were. I didn't open any of them. Not yet. Instead, I got up, showered, and got dressed. I didn't feel different. No overwhelming sense of victory. No rush of satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty that I had done what needed to be done. I finally checked my messages. Laura's texts were frantic at first. Please, just talk to me. I know you're angry, but we can fix this. Where are you? People are calling me, saying insane things. Did you do this? Then the tone shifted. You're trying to ruin my life. This is beyond cruel. How could you involve my family? You don't understand what you've done. By the end, the messages were short. You win. I hope you're happy. I put my phone down and checked out of the hotel. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was still there. I had half expected her to be gone by now, to have packed whatever she could and run somewhere she felt safe. But no. She was inside, waiting. I walked in without hesitation. She was in the living room, standing in the same spot she had been the last time I saw her. The suitcase that had been packed yesterday was now open, clothes spilling onto the floor. Her phone was on the table, screen lit up with missed calls. She turned when I entered, her expression unreadable. You destroyed everything, she said, her voice hoarse. I closed the door behind me. No, Laura. You did that. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you're some kind of hero? I walked past her, sitting down in the chair across the room. I think I finally stopped pretending. She shook her head. You wanted revenge. You wanted to humiliate me. I tilted my head slightly. If I wanted to humiliate you, I would have done a lot worse. Her jaw clenched. She wasn't crying. Not anymore. Maybe she had run out of tears. Maybe she had realized there was no point. You didn't just leave, she said. You made sure I had nothing left. You didn't leave me much of a choice, I replied. You were never going to tell me the truth, Laura. You were going to lie until there was no way to lie anymore. She sat down on the couch, running a hand through her hair. Do you feel better now? I exhaled slowly. No. She looked at me then, genuinely surprised. Then why? I leaned forward slightly, resting my arms on my knees. Because you don't get to walk away from this like it never happened. You don't get to rewrite the story and make yourself the victim. She didn't respond. I let the silence settle. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it but didn't pick it up. Rachel called me, she said quietly. Adam isn't coming home. I nodded. I wasn't surprised. Her eyes flickered toward me. She said she's filing for divorce. I didn't say anything. Laura swallowed. Are you? It wasn't a question that needed to be asked. She knew the answer. I stood up. The papers will be here by the end of the week. She didn't argue. For the first time since this started, she looked truly lost. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I stood near the doorway, watching Laura as she sat on the couch, her fingers gripping the edge of her sleeves, her phone buzzing on the table beside her. She didn't reach for it. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to say. Maybe she was too exhausted to keep pretending. The house was silent, filled with something heavier than words. Everything that had happened in the past 24 hours had settled like an irreversible weight between us. She had nothing left. No excuses, no defenses, no way to twist the truth into something she could live with. And for the first time, she wasn't trying to. I had imagined this moment before. I thought there would be more resistance, maybe one last desperate attempt to shift the blame. But there was none. She just sat there, staring ahead, as if she was only now beginning to comprehend what she had done, not just to me, but to herself. I didn't feel pity. Laura had walked away from this marriage long before I ever stepped out of the house. She had just been too comfortable to admit it. Too sure that I would never find out. Too confident that if I ever did, she could find a way to keep me. She had gambled everything. And she had lost. I stepped past her and walked upstairs. The bedroom, her bedroom now, was exactly as I had left it. The bed was still made, the closet door open, the space where my things had been now empty. The bag I packed last night was still resting near the doorway. I picked it up, glancing around the room one last time. This place had once been my home. Now, it was nothing more than a collection of walls and furniture, a space I had no desire to return to. I turned and walked back downstairs. She hadn't moved. But this time, her eyes were on me. "When are you leaving?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now," I said. She nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting that answer but had still hoped to hear something different. "Where will you go?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know yet. She looked down at her hands, exhaling shakily. I never wanted it to end like this. I didn't hesitate. "Then you shouldn't have done it." She flinched but didn't argue. There was no point in lying anymore. I reached for my keys. "The divorce papers will be here soon. Sign them, and this will be over." Her lips pressed together, but she nodded. I turned toward the door, not bothering to glance back. The house felt smaller as I stepped outside. The air was cool, the street empty, the neighborhood quiet, exactly the same as it had been yesterday, yet everything had changed. I walked to my car and opened the door, throwing my bag onto the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. Then I started the engine and pulled away from the house for the last time. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I didn't drive toward any particular destination. The city stretched ahead of me, full of places I could go, but nowhere I wanted to be. The realization should have felt overwhelming, but instead, it was something else. It was freedom. For 8 months, I had been living in a lie, and I hadn't even known it. I had gone through my days believing I was married to someone who respected me, who valued the life we had built together. And in a way, that was the most painful part of all, not just that Laura had betrayed me, but that I had never once suspected it. I had trusted blindly, and now I was paying the price for it. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe it meant that I had never been the kind of man who went looking for betrayal in the first place. I had never snooped through her phone, never doubted her loyalty, never treated her like someone who would need to be monitored. And wasn't that how a relationship was supposed to be? Built on trust, not suspicion? She had been the one to break it. Not me. And that meant her actions weren't a reflection of who I was. They were a reflection of her. The thought settled something in me. I wasn't leaving this marriage as a man who had failed. I was leaving as a man who had been wronged. And that was a distinction that mattered. I pulled into a quiet parking lot, shutting off the engine. I sat there, staring at my hands. They weren't shaking. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly sad. I was just still. I had spent so much time trying to understand Laura's choices. Trying to figure out what had led her to betray me, why she had continued the affair for so long, why she had never confessed, why she had kept up the charade. But maybe none of that mattered. Maybe the only thing that mattered now was what came next. I pulled out my phone. I had messages waiting for me, missed calls, unread texts from people who had heard what had happened. Some from my family, some from friends, some from Laura's friends who didn't know whose side they should be on yet. I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. Instead, I opened a blank notepad on my phone. And I wrote things I want next. A place of my own. Not a house full of memories. Not somewhere that felt like a compromise. A space that was mine. A fresh start. A city I had always wanted to visit. A job I had never considered before. A new hobby. Something that reminded me that life didn't end here. People who matter. Friends who had always been there for me. Family I hadn't visited in too long. Conversations that weren't forced. Connections that were real. No more settling. No more staying in situations just because they were comfortable. No more ignoring red flags. No more giving people more chances than they deserved. My own happiness. Not tied to someone else. Not dependent on whether or not I was in a relationship. Something that was mine, that no one could take away. I stared at the list for a long time. Then I put my phone away and started the car again. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out.